Hello, everybody, one and all. Welcome to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy Podcast. With me today is my lifelong friend and co-host, Dylan.
I'm ready to talk some fantasy with my friend, Charles.
I'm ready to talk some fantasy with my friend, Dylan, as well. And it's a very special day today because for the first time ever in Friends Talking Fantasy history, over 150 episodes in like 13 months of running the show, we are recording in person.
Yes,
Woo!
we are. Yeah, it's awesome. I'm not wearing headphones, which is the weirdest part of this. I usually say turn this up in my headphones, and here I am, no headphones, just talking to a mic. I don't really know how recording goes. That's always Charles, but I'm assuming it's working.
Yeah, I would assume so as well. That's the thing, right? It's like, oh, a record in person would be so much easier. But then I'm like, wait, I don't know how to do any of the things that I normally do remotely. Like, how do I play the intro music in two different headphones from my one computer? Like, how do I get different microphones to work? So we're in a hotel room, huddled up across from this wonderful little microphone that I brought with us today. So
We have one chair.
we have one chair.
And Charles is in it, which might surprise some people.
I get the chair,
Yeah.
and you're sitting on the drawers,
Yeah.
the furniture, and we are making it happen, guys, because we just can't delay. What better way to celebrate our first in-person recording than to talk about indie authors, indie book recommendations during the month of Indie August.
Yeah, hashtag Indie August. That's that's a hashtag that's going wild over there. It started from our friend Ben, who's a reviewer over at Literature and Lo-Fi, and it's just been this really awesome, supportive, collaborative movement happening on Twitter. And if you go down that hashtag Indie August, you see all sorts of folks talking about the indie books that they're reading, and we're hoping to help contribute to that by doing this indie author recommendation, or it was indie author recs, indie book recs, both, I guess.
Yeah.
It's indie book recommendations brought to you by a call for recommendations on Twitter that we did that got
and
a
this
lot
is
of responses.
this is another big first in the Friends Talking Fantasy history. We're recording in person, but also this was by far the largest indie, the largest call for recommendations we've ever received. You know, it's more recommendations than we've ever had in the past. It's like over 41 retweets, 117 likes. Like, we asked for indie recs and you guys delivered. So we're going to try and get to as many people as we possibly can, probably spread over multiple episodes. So if we didn't get to you today, maybe we'll get to you the next time. This will be at least 2 episodes, maybe more. We're going to, because it's Indie August, we want to make sure we spotlight as many of these books as possible. And you guys brought in some great recommendations. So thank you everyone who left a recommendation. Thank you, Ben, for starting the Indie August campaign. And let's just get right into the reviews. I think the first thing we need to do, Dylan, I think it's natural to have you drop some recommendations first, because you've been in the indie author sphere a lot recently as a judge on SPIFBO 7. I know there's a couple books that you've been reading and preparing reviews for. It might be a good idea to start the show off with dropping some of those, to recommend to the listeners.
Yeah, sure thing, Charles. Appreciate you turning it my way for that. Yeah, so SPIFBO, by the way, is self-published fantasy blog off for any folks who don't know. We'll probably have an episode explaining more of what SPIFBO is coming up relatively soon. So stay tuned if you're looking for that. And in the meantime, I'll get into some of these books that I've been reading to help out with this competition. And I'll say I've been very impressed by the books that have come my way. Beth Tabler, who runs Before We Go blog, that's our team in this competition. She has divvied up the books for all the different folks on our team to read, and I have 3 of them, and I've been very impressed by all of them. I'll go through them. One of them I already wrote a review of that folks can find if they want to. Maybe you could throw that in the show notes or episode description if people want to take a look at it. That would be Trials of the Core by Mike Thies. And that one, really interesting sort of science fantasy setting. I get into that a lot more, but I think a lot of fans looking for an interesting blend of world building from science fiction elements as well as fantasy elements would find a lot to love in that. We're talking hoverboards coexisting with mermaids, so that's going to be a lot of fun for a lot of folks. And then I've got two other books that I've been reading at the same time for this, which is one is The Innerlands by A.J. Austin. That one I am absolutely loving. I just tweeted about it recently. It's very psychological. It deals with topics like trauma and difficult parental relationships, and I can see as I'm getting further into it, the world is going to start opening up, and just a really interesting young female main character, and a lot of complex topics being tackled with a lot of depth, I think. So highly recommend that one from what I've read so far. And I'm also reading through one called Hooded by A.A. Woods. And that one is a young adult sort of Red Riding Hood. I don't know. It's like an homage to Red Riding Hood. It's got an interesting magic system. It's got this sort of young adult feel to a character that I think is going to more come into their power. I'm not super deep into it, but I definitely recommend those as ones that y'all can check out because all have something really interesting to offer.
That sounds great, man. Yeah, it's cool to actually get your feedback on this, because for me it's like there's so many indie author books out there, and to be able to spotlight the ones that you've been able to work with, it's almost like you're on like the ground floor of all these like these new indie books, and I am looking forward to hearing your feedback on some of these other books as you read through them more, because I feel like me, along with a lot of other people that we've talked to on Twitter, are trying to get more into indie books and want to support that community, and it can be hard to know, like, where to get started or what books are for you. They don't have publishers out there writing all these blurbs and like trying to get their books out there. So that's why I think having a recommendations episode around these things is going to be really helpful. So
yeah,
great.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I appreciate it. I do feel like it's a total honor to get to be a part of SPIFBO. I think it's an interesting thing because we're at the part of the competition where a lot of what we have to do is try to work on cuts of things, because there's this massive group and so many amazing novels being submitted, and I definitely am doing my best to want to be like helpful and be a contributing member of the community, and this part can feel a little bit tough, and maybe I sometimes lose that what I'm doing is like helpful and being a contributing member, because you don't want to cut books that are a lot of interest and fun and would be great recommendations for folks. So yeah, good reminder. Feel like I'm doing something good.
Absolutely. And that's enough about you. Let's get into what people in the Twitter community have recommended for us. Now, Dylan, you're, as the social media guru here, you're going to navigate the Twitter thread for us and let us know where to start in this very long, complex thread of indie author recommendations. So what do we have? Where are we going to start?
All right. Well, our first recommendation comes from Nick Borelli at Nick Reviews, who's always stopping by these threads. He's a reviewer and gives absolutely incredible recommendations. And he said, my two favorite self-pub titles this year have been Norilska Groans by Michael Fletcher and Clayton Snyder, and Legacy of the Brightwash by Crystal Matar. He said, both absolutely blew me away and deserve nothing but unfettered praise. That's a good drop, unfettered praise.
Yeah, I like that. Good coming from, can't expect anything less coming from a reviewer.
Yes. So that first one, Norilska Groans, that one's co-authored by Michael Fletcher and Clayton Snyder. It's interesting. You'll see Michael Fletcher comes up a lot when we do these episodes, like the where to start with Grimdark. So he's well known. He's literally at the top of, you remember when we read those rankings from Mark Lawrence, where he had people vote on what was the most grimdark stuff.
Yeah.
The name sitting at the top of that rating system as the most grimdark is a book, Beyond Redemption by Michael R. Fletcher.
Mm-hmm.
So we have not read Norilska Groans. We actually have a lot of like new books that we are really going to want to check out after this one. But I would imagine if you're reading Michael R. Fletcher's work, it's going to involve some serious grimdark elements. So I would say you want to be ready for that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got Legacy of the Brightwash by Crystal Matar. And this book, it's been going absolutely wild on Twitter. I own a copy of it. I've read some of the early stuff in it. It's in the Spiffbo competition, and it's from what I can gather, a lot of folks are expecting it to do extremely well. Crystal is a really, really nice woman that we've interacted with on Twitter, and if my read of some of the early stuff in Legacy of the Brightwash is an indication alongside all these people saying all these amazing things, I think that's an incredible recommendation, and a lot of folks I think would really enjoy this book. I can tell it involves a lot of complex characters, an interesting setting, and things like male vulnerability being modeled in there, which are things that are really cool and important to me. So I'm going to keep reading that. I'm expecting I'll probably see it at some point during all this Spiffbo competition and have to read for that. So I'm really excited for when I get to it, and I really hope a lot of folks check that one out.
Yeah, and, Nick Burrell, even I'm on, the Goodreads page for this book, and Nick Burrell's reviews right at the top, and he says, this should end up being the must-read fantasy book of the year, in my opinion. So that's very high praise indeed. Mm-hmm. And yeah, Nick, thanks for dropping these reviews. I really appreciated it. Some of these have come up. I've heard of a few of these multiple times, these authors, these books. So yeah, our TBR, we do a lot of these back-to-back book recommendations. Yeah. These books are going to recommend it so fast to us. But I think for Indie August, man, making these, spotlighting these is really important. So that's great.
Yeah. And we're going to see Legacy of the Brightwash coming up more for sure as we go through this thread. I know that.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. So next up, we have a recommendation from Sue's Musing at Sue Bavey, and she's a blogger who has a lot of awesome posts, and one of these posts is one that she shared as part of this recommendation thread. It's a really cool post with a lot of interesting novels in it, so recommend checking out her post there. We've got recommendations, including Cold from the North, she listed. And Charles, you and I have read Cold from... I don't think that's in the post. Right. But she said these in all of the post and said, plus Windborn, Cold from the North, Storytellers, and many more.
Right.
So...
Yeah, we've had the privilege of being able to, get an early copy of Cold from the North. D.W. Ross had reached out to us a while back, and we read through that and dropped an episode, leaving our spotlight of Cold from the North several months ago. So definitely go check that out. But yeah, D.W. Ross, super nice guy, super good presence on Twitter, and it was a great when we were reading Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne, it reminded me of Cold from the North. This Viking setting. With this really engaging Viking inspired world building, Norse combat, and some of the action scenes were just in the beginning it starts off so fast and strong, and big fan of Cold from the North, and I think it's one that's been making the circuits on book Twitter. It's come up quite a bit over the past couple months, so yeah, I think it's a great recommendation.
Yeah, so that's a great recommendation. And also, check out Sue Bavey's. It's Self-Published Authors Appreciation Week. 5 Feisty Females of Fantasy is this post. And it's got a lot of great books. I'm just scrolling through it right now. So, Yep, that's a great post from Sue, and we'll keep on rolling because next up we've got a recommendation from Sarah at Fiction Fans Podcast. That's
Right.
at Fiction Fans Pod, and our listeners probably know by now. We've done a few collaborations with Fiction Fans. That's Sarah and Lily. They're fantastic folks, and speaking of great presences on Twitter, definitely give Fiction Fans a follow and check out their podcast if you haven't gotten the chance to yet. And Fiction Fans recommended, no surprise here, Legacy of the Brightwash. That's Crystal Matar, and Sarah has been a huge proponent of this book. I think they just recorded an episode with Crystal, and they've had Crystal on before. I think they just recorded an episode with Crystal on Legacy of the Brightwash. Don't quote me on that, but my vague Twitter following of things going on, I think that's happened, so you might want to look out for that coming your way. And I know I really enjoyed their first episode that they recorded with Crystal, so a lot of great stuff that they have offering there. And of course, Legacy of the Brightwash, going to be an awesome book to check out based on everything I've heard and the little that I've read. And they also have a recommendation, or Sarah does. She said, I'm also loving Fortune's Fool by Angela Board, and although I'm only a quarter of the way through. And she says, it looks like pretty much everyone I'd recommend has already been brought up, I think. So, yeah, we got a lot of awesome recommendations. And Fortune's Fool, they did just release an episode on that. Fiction Fans did. So,
yeah, they've been doing, like really awesome indie author reads and interviews and things like that. They really have become good experts in that community on book Twitter. So, if you've read some of these, I would definitely go over to Fiction Fans and follow up with their interviews and things like that. Like, how awesome is it that you can read the book and then go hear the interview? I think that's awesome.
Yeah, totally agree. So then, speaking of author interviews, Charles, we have a book recommended here with a man that we've interviewed as the author. That would be a recommendation from at Lord Grumpy Dark.
Lord Grumpy Dark dropped a recommendation?
Yeah, he stopped by, and
That's good get.
He's a champion of one particular indie book that we just so happen to love as well. That's Daughter of Flood and Fury by Spiffbo finalist Levi Jacobs. You can find at IR Levi Jacobs. And yeah, I mean, what can we say about Daughter of Flood and Fury to some extent that we haven't said probably better in other episodes? We've had 2 episodes that are to some degree on Daughter of Flood and Fury by Levi Jacobs. One way back that was like a spoiler-free recommendation, and another where we interviewed Levi and had a really awesome conversation with him. We have 3 episodes.
We have 3 episodes with Levi. No, 2 with Levi, 3 about him.
Right. Yes. So, yes. And then Levi came on another time for a Friends Creating Fantasy episode is the 3rd episode where we actually outlined a book together with a Spiffbo finalist. And it was a ton of fun. And Levi, I want to recommend the book, which is Daughter of Flood and Fury, a fantastic, fast-paced, thrilling read. It's a pretty quick read. You'll fly through it. And I usually recommend it for folks who are fans of Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson.
That's a good one. Yeah. Because it's got that like technical magic system, but it's also like fast-flowing and exciting, and it doesn't get bogged down in the technicalities, but it's there. That it's that kind of that skill in writing like an action-based scientific like magic system, like being able to do that in a way that's like super easy and exciting to digest. I think that's where Levi invites comparisons to Sanderson. It's a great skill to pull off. And yeah, it's book 1 of the Tidecaller Chronicles. I know book 2, Witch of Wealth and Ruin, came out a few months ago, and Lord Grumpy Dark has been a proponent of that as well, and we're excited to get into it. We read through the first one, and we thought it was really great. It's this first person narrative, which is super interesting, and the
present tense.
Yeah, present tense as well. So it's like it's a really. For me, it was just kind of almost like was a break in our reading pattern to read something like that, and I was very engaged with it, so I thought it was a great story, and I'm looking forward to continuing the Tide Chronicle series, and having Levi Jacobs on the show, open invitation, Levi, anytime.
Yes, he's probably busy selling fruit over in North Dakota right now, I would guess. But always an open invitation to have Levi on. If you're listening, Levi, we'll probably give him a tag when we
will
post this on Twitter. And awesome guy. Check out his books, and thank you for stopping by, Lord Grumpy Dark, whoever you are.
Yeah.
There is that hashtag #WhoIsLGD that folks can use if they're trying to uncover the mystery of who Lord Grumpy Dark is. So next up, we have a recommendation from Jody at WNS Book Club. That's We and Sarcastic Book Club. And Jody's actually on the same Spiffbo 7 team as me, Team Beth, and over at Before We Go blog. And Jody has her own blog, Witty and Sarcastic Book Club. And that's at WS_book club. And she gave a ton of indie recs. Most of us, which, Charles, looking at it, you and I don't know if we've read any of these really. But
should we just read through them?
Yeah, let's read through them. The Ventafact Colossus by Dorian Hart. Dragon Mage by M.L. Spencer. I've heard a lot of amazing things about Dragon Mage, though. And The Withered King by Ricardo Victoria. Vultures by Luke Tarzian. I hope I'm saying that right. The Mayor Cycle by Dan Fitzgerald. And Dan's just a wonderful man that we've had great interactions with on Twitter. Super nice dude, and posts some really interesting... He's just like a thoughtful guy who posts a lot of interesting tweets about kind of the genre and thinking through it, and a really nice person too. And then Kings and Demons by Marcus Lee, Small Places by Matthew Samuels, and Paladin Unbound by Jeffrey Spite, who's another really, really nice dude that we've had some interactions with. I think he's from Long Island, too.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Fellow Long Islander.
Originally,
yeah. And that's where we are currently recording, so. Just visiting the old home, the old stomping ground. So, that's awesome. And, like, all of these are new to me. I recognize some of the authors from our interactions on Twitter, but we did get to read Paladin Unbound, and that was, Jeffrey Spite is such an awesome guy and super nice, and I see he even popped in on the thread to leave a thank you, which is nice to see. But Paladin Unbound, like, I got, like, it made me think of, like, classic D&D games, like that really, like, traditional fantasy. So I think that anyone who loves those kind of more classic fantasy works would have a great time with Paladin Unbound, because it is a very modern story, but it harkens to all these really fun, like, D&D elements and things. For me, anyway. I don't think he, like, leans on it that much, but that's just my kind of, like, monsters, paladins, like those kinds of things. Orcs, they're all in there.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And I've been seeing a lot of great buzz about Paladin Unbound on Twitter, some 5-star reviews from folks in the community, and and like you were saying, Jeff, awesome dude. So a lot of great recs there, and for me, like, a rec from Jody is a rec for me. So she's awesome. Let's keep it rolling.
Keep it rolling. Who do we have next on our indie author recommendations episode?
We've got Rowena. I hope I'm saying your name right. We've got at R_M. I think that might be 2 underscores. Andrews is going to recommend Seraphina's Lament of Honey and Wildfires by at Bookworm Blues, which is Sarah Chorn, and Altar on the Village Green by Nathan Hall, I believe. We've got Bloodlines / Pieces of 8 by Peter Hartog. We've got Dead Sagas by it's at Longsword Lee,
which I believe is Lee C. Conley.
Lee C. Conley, gotcha. We've got Bloodline / Pieces. Sorry,
you read that already.
I read that one already.
It's a long list.
It is a long list. Windborn by Alex S. Bradshaw, who is a Spiffbo 7 semifinalist. We've got Children by Bjorn Larson, and we've got Legacy of the Brightwash again by Crystal Matar. So
great Rex. And yeah, Legacy of the Brightwash is one that we said you were going to see quite a bit, and that doesn't. That's no surprise that she keeps coming up. So that's always good to see, and so many awesome. It's good to see when people show up to these recommendations things with just a ton of books. It's like there's so many great like indie stories out there, and I think that's one of like the best things about the community and the genre is that there's so many people just putting their passion into creating their story, and that the fact that they're able to get it out there now is super awesome. So thank you to R.M. Andrews for putting those recs together for us. It's a long list that we greatly appreciate.
Well said, Charles.
Mm-hmm.
So next up, we've got some recommendations from Fantasy Book Nerd. Gotta love it. Yeah, at Fantasy Book Nerd.
I see he's redone his Twitter
I know.
Picture here, cover picture here. Fancy, always innovating, that Fantasy Book Nerd.
Yeah, who I lovingly call FBN, and FBN, just an awesome presence on Twitter. He's real active on there, and really, really great guy. And I highly recommend checking out fantasybooknerd.com, and you'll find a lot of great reviews and posts on there. And you'll also find some great recs that he's going to give here. So he says, here's a few loners. That's D.B. Bray / Wahida Clark. The Dark Crowns and Coven of Shadows. That's S.C. Gowland. Weird Gods and the Darken by Susanna Imaginario. First Steps, Luke Daher. The Thunder Heist, that's Jed Hearn. The Swordsman's Lament by G.M. White. Keeper of the Fallen, Alyssa Lausang. I hope I'm saying that right. So apologies to any people that I'm mispronouncing. Yeah,
Doing this on the fly.
Yeah, it's a problem of the podcast format. So you see all these things in writing, and you read these books, and then you don't really know how anything is said. But doing our best, and I'll say we've had some interactions with D.B. Bray, who's the author of Loners, and I know a bit about that book. FBN has been championing that book for a while, and it's a book that is supposed to be extremely funny. Like, it's a humorous novel. We just came off Kings of the Wild, which is a hilarious book by Nicholas Eames, and I've heard some folks compare those two just from a humor standpoint. I think the story is very different. I think the story is about a dwarf, if I'm correct. It's a humorous dwarven action adventure fantasy, and and one of the blurbs I'm seeing here is, these dwarves ain't the ones from The Hobbit. That's for damn sure. So I think a lot of folks looking for humorous fantasy and trying to check out a book with some dwarven main characters, that's going to be a lot of fun for them. So
does this book have two authors? I'm seeing that it might be co-authored on like the Amazon listing of D.B. Bray and Wahida Clark. I don't know if
FBN. That was an FBN.
Okay. Yeah, great. Well, of course.
Yes. Jed Hearn also does a podcast that's Wizards, Warriors, and Words, which is a podcast kind of about writing and stuff like that with a bunch of other self-pub authors, and I've listened to it. It's good stuff. So I haven't read The Thunder Heist by Jed Hearn yet, but it seems like he really knows his stuff when it comes to writing. And then a bunch of other awesome recs, and FBN's another person that a rec from him is a rec from us. Yeah,
absolutely. And he's come to a lot of these recommendation things with some really awesome contributions. So definitely take note, guys, if you're interested in indie books, which I imagine you would be if you're this far in. So definitely you can check out all of his recommendations, and you would not be missed. So who do we have next on our fantasy book recommendations thread here?
Next up, we have Bender, who's
another OG.
Yes, a reviewer over at FanFi Addict, at Jack Cleaver, and just a really funny guy with some great voiceover on Twitter. And he posted a few great recs. with some descriptions too, which we love to give people an idea
nice.
of what they're in for. So we've got Gray Bastards by Jonathan French, which Bender says, Sons of Anarchy on Wild Hogs. And I guess that is that a pun? Hogs? Right? Don't people call motorcycles hogs?
They do.
Yeah. And that's Sons of Anarchy. Okay.
Mm.
And then we've got Paternus. So Paternus is a book that I've heard pitched as epic urban fantasy by Dirk Ashton, who another person with awesome presence on Twitter, and I've heard amazing things about Paternus. So if that idea appeals to you like it appeals to me, epic urban fantasy, then that's a great one to check out. We've got Blackstone Heart, and the way that Bender pitched that one is grim dark!
Exclamation point. Lots of letters. Oh, it's that funny voice we look for from Bender.
Yes. Oh, and also say Paternus, Bender said, best mythology series. So, yeah. And the next one up, Charles, is one that we've been eyeing up a lot here. That's Swords of Kaigen. And Charles, I know you've been talking about wanting to get that on the reading schedule and stuff.
Yeah. This one was recommended to us like several times, and then when we had Sam Buckenhand on to leave her recommendations, she championed that series as well, and it's, it was on the Make Charles Cry recommendation series. It's now in this one, and it was, Sam had championed it, and I believe Benjamin at Literature and Lo-Fi also has been championing it. I don't know if he dropped it when he left recommendations for us on our show, but he has. He read it recently and highly recommended it. His book Hangover thing that he loves to go into, he was like, oh my God, this book. So it's just been at the top of, it's been in my head circling around because I've always loved Japanese inspired fantasy as well, and the fact that it's just gotten so much praise. And even Levi Jacobs said there's a reason it won. No one could stop crying.
Yeah.
So just really, really interested in reading it, and we are trying to shoehorn it into the more immediate reading schedule because of that.
For sure. And that's by M.L. Wong. And Sword of Kaigen, a Theonite war story, like Charles has been saying, making all these people cry, and we're hoping it'll be the first fantasy book that will ever make my wonderful lifelong friend and co-host Charles over here have tears leave his eyes from reading a fantasy novel.
Yeah, it's nice that we're in person now, so I can see you gesturing in front of my face please cry.
Yes. Charles loves the usual protection of a Zoom call where I can't reach out and gesture way too close to his face. So...
That's right. It's I can just look at a different monitor or minimize you, which I would never do. I would never minimize you.
Oh, yes.
But
I'm sure I've never been minimized on your screen.
Of course not. But thank you, Bender at Jack Claver, for leaving those recs and some really strong ones on there. And Dylan, who's next on the list?
Next up, we've got Ben from At Literature
so we're going
and
from
Lo-Fi.
fantasy book nerd to Bender to Benjamin. It's we're killing it, man. This is great.
Oh yeah, no, we had some really awesome folks in the community stop by, and Ben is the creator of the hashtag Indie August. I guess campaign is what you called it.
Sure.
The movement that is really happening on Twitter again. You check that out. It's at least last time I checked, it was going wild.
So get your pens and papers out, people. We're going to be dropping a lot of books and authors.
Oh yeah,
here.
yeah. And this might just be dropping books and authors. I don't know if we can describe all of the ones that he has posted. Right. He says, "You really want a list because I've got one," and I was like, "Yeah, of course." And then he ends up recommending Paternus by Dirk Ashton. He recommends Songs of Insurrection by J.C. Kang, Blackstone Heart by Michael R. Fletcher, Paladin Unbound by Jeff Spite, Voice of War by Zach Argyle, Dragon Mage, has come up before, by M.L. Spencer, Seasons of Albaddon by Chris R. Warman, and he ended up, a lot of these folks ended up stopping by the thread, actually, and commenting and basically just saying thanks. I'm sure a lot of indie authors are appreciating Ben's work here to be such a big proponent of a lot of these works that aren't getting the attention that we might really want them to. So, yeah. And he said that I could go on, but I won't. Otherwise, this will become a huge indie TBR list. But I'd love it if you boys at FTF picked up a couple books for hashtag Indie August. He's still campaigning.
He's still gotta appreciate the hustle, man. Yeah, we'll you may be surprised, Benjamin, or maybe not. Who knows? But stuff is coming down the pipeline. You don't think we'd miss Indie August, guys? Hashtag Indie August. We would never let that just go by unanswered. So we'll see. We'll see what comes up.
Yeah. All right. So next up, we've got Kira of the Wind, Erica McCorkle, and at Kira of the Wind 1 is their Twitter handle. Recommended, I hope I'm saying this right, Skein of Fate by Leslie Ann Moore, and then Hollow Road by Dan Fitzgerald, who we mentioned earlier.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I see Dan Fitzgerald even popped into that for a nice thank you emoji, which always good to see those emojis.
A monkey and a grateful smiley face is what we got.
Well said, Dan.
Yes. So next up, we've got the Fong of Emberlane. At Fong of Emberlane, that's Paul, a fellow tennis player. I know we bonded over our mutual love of tennis and Andre Agassi, a former world #1 tennis player. But he's here to talk books, Charles, and so are we. So he said, looking forward to this episode as I need to up my game on this front too. And we know that feeling. It's like we always want to be supporting as much as possible and managing that with our TBR. So we're happy to be able to hopefully spread some word here. A couple of my favorites are Dawn of Wonder and sort of Kaigen. We know Paul's the originator of the hashtag Make Charles Cry.
That he is. He is.
So he's coming in, and he's been pushing that one as maybe the thing that could get done. We tried to make you cry by reading The Paper Menagerie by Ken Liu, which was another recommendation from Paul.
Great, touching, emotional story, for sure.
Yes, one that made me cry.
It made tears swell, man. Tears were swelling,
But they didn't leave your eyes.
I mean, if that's how you want to classify crying, maybe, but there were tears, I guess.
I feel like most people classify crying as tears leaving your eyes, but Charles, we'll let you have this one. And so I own a copy of Dawn of Wonder, an audiobook copy, I believe, that I just haven't gotten around to yet. So I'm excited to check that out. And then sort of Kaigen, obviously, one that we will be reading sooner rather than later. Then he said some high on my list, which I assume means he hasn't read them yet, but wants to check them out. And these are ones that all of which came up before: Dragon Mage, Fortune's Fool, Legacy of the Brightwash, and Children.
Nice.
And I see, a lot of great recs there.
Yeah, those are some strong ones. Yeah, a lot of repeats on here, which is always a good sign.
Yes, when you start seeing it come up a lot, it's stuff that is very, very likely to be really enjoyable for a lot of folks.
That's right. And I mean, there's so many more people to discuss, so many more recommendations to cover. I think we have time for maybe a few more, but Dylan will highlight some of those for us. But we will be back. We do want to get through as much of this as we possibly can in Indie August, but for now, let's just get a few more going. Dylan, who's next on the list here?
Next up, we've got P.L. Stewart, who's an indie author himself, recommend a bunch of books, and that's at P.L. Stewart Writes if you want to give him a follow. And a lot of these did come up before. Some are new, and it's Twitter handles and hashtags, so I'll do my best to read all of them in the right way. We've got Children by Bjorn Larson. We've got Neglected Merge by Eve Koguchi. We've got Legacy of the Brightwash by Crystal Matar coming up again. Fortune's Fool by Angela Board coming up again. Voice of War by Zach Argyle coming up again. Hall of Bones by Tim Hardy. I think that's the first rec of that one. We Men of Ash and Shadow by Holly Tinsley. Quicksilver and Brimstone by, I'm not sure. At Red Elixir is tagged, and I'm not seeing that person's name. I'll try to take a look for that in a sec. And then we've got The Raven Master's Revenge by Jacob Sanix. And that's a lot of Rex, and by someone who knows what he's talking about over there as a fellow indie author.
That's right. Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning that P.L. Stewart's A Drowned Kingdom is one that he's put out there recently that, you know, it's been getting a lot of traction for him. So definitely check that out as well.
Well said, Charles. And that's Quicksilver and Brimstone by Elizabeth Eckstein.
Great.
So, all right, we'll keep rolling here. We've got recommendation from Ricardo Victoria at winged_Leo, who's had his books recommended already to us on this episode and to you folks listening. And he agrees, because he says, at risk of sounding conceited, I would say mine. And that's fair. You know, we get that indie authors, you have to do all of the marketing yourself. So it's like, we're happy to try to help out in these ways and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, you don't have that traditional publishing bump of marketing. So you got to come out and promote yourself, or who else is going to. Yeah, Ricardo, of course, definitely recommend your own work. And then also he wrote about the Inklings Press anthology. I don't know a lot about that, but it's Inklings Press is an indie publisher. So I'm assuming just a bunch of folks getting together and writing an anthology series. And then the Reva Lunaria series by Jeff Habiger and Koi Kissy, co-author. The Ascension Machine by Storycast Rob is the Twitter handle, and that's Rob Edwards. The Arathos series by Rob Nugent, and the Steampunk Oliver Twist books. That sounds very interesting. By Brent A. Harris. A bunch of great recs from an indie author.
Bunch of great recs, and you know, I feel like there's so much that we need to digest right now. And when we announce this episode, we're going to be tagging as many people as we can all the authors as well as the people that have left their review recommendations here. So if you feel like we threw a lot at you and you want to come back and see like, okay, who are these people? How do I support them? How do I check them out? Just look out for that post over on our Twitter page where we will do the research, pull all of the handles that are out there for the books that we've recommended, and we will make sure we drop them all in the comments of that post. So if there's someone that you've heard that sounded interesting, or you just want to take a look at the full list, be sure to check that out. And although we're probably going to wrap it up right now for today, there's still so many more recs to get through. So please, guys, be sure to come back next time for a part 2. Maybe there'll even be a part 3 and beyond. Who knows?
We've got so many recs.
We've got
just scrolling down this.
So many recs. So we're going to have to maybe speed it up as well. And we'll leave a comment to... we'll leave a link to our original post as well. There was a lot of fun over there. The actual authors coming out, saying thank you, putting their own thoughts out there on the threads too. So that's a great resource as well for getting recommendations too. So between that post and the tags that we'll leave for this episode announcement, you'll have a resource to go back and find some of these people and check them out. And if you do check them out, let us know, because we really want to be supportive of indie authors. We've been trying to read more and more, and you know, Dylan, you're doing a great job over there, and Spiffbo 7 with Beth Tabler and the Before We Go blog, making that happen. So we'll be getting some more reviews out. I'm sure Dylan will be sharing his reviews for the books that he's read for Spiffbo, and who knows, maybe we'll be talking to people like Beth Tabler in the near future. Perhaps. No guarantees in this world, but you never know. And guys, thank you so much for listening. We hope you check out an indie book soon for #IndieAugust. And I mean, anything else to say, Dylan, before we play that sweet, sweet outro music?
Well, I was just thinking about what you were saying about how we had all these authors stopping by in the thread, and want to say that's something that's so cool about getting involved in the indie author community is these folks are coming out and really engaging.
Very approachable.
Very approachable. And it can be this very unique experience of feeling a lot more almost like closeness. Of course, there's a lot of great traditionally published authors who engage a lot on Twitter, but I do notice this about the indie author community is they feel very accessible and they're out there like having fun and just engaging with us as part of the community. And so many great names that we're seeing today who I recognize. And it's like, oh yeah, we've had great Twitter exchanges. They're so nice. And I just want to give a shout out and say thank you to all the folks who came by and not just the author. Definitely want to thank the authors and say it's awesome you came by, but also thank you to all the folks who are contributing to our thread, giving these recommendations and spreading the word and participating in hashtag Indie August in a way that I hope let's get a lot of let's get a lot of these books read and bought and all that kind of stuff. Right?
If we're going to humble brag about like our most engaged post ever, I'm just super thrilled that it's a post that promotes indie authors. So that's like what it's about. So the fact that all came together is very awesome to see. So definitely check them out. The link will be in the description for the original post, and then the announcement will have all the tags for the authors. So you can check all of that out. And I guess for now, guys, there's nothing left to do but play that sweet, sweet outro music. But we're
not going to talk over it because you don't know how to play it.
I'll start it now in post, and so it's playing now, and then I guess we can go through our usual script here, which is basically something like without the music, it's going to feel weird. It's the first time I've ever done it without the music cue. But thank you all so much for listening to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy Podcast. If you like what you heard today, check us out over on social media at the FTF Podcast with a number 1 at the end, and over on Instagram at the FTF Podcast. And Dylan, if they like what they heard today and they want to support the show even further than engaging with us on social media, and they just so happen to be listening on Apple Podcasts, what can they do?
Toss 5 stars to our podcast. Just find that Friends Talking Fantasy page on the Apple Podcast app. Click the Friends Talking Fantasy page. Scroll down past all those episodes until you start seeing stars. Once you're seeing stars, the optimal number of stars to click in order to support the show would be 5 of them if you have a little bit of extra time. I feel like I go through the motions on this. It's super, super helpful for us when you write us a review.
Yes.
Like, it does mean a lot to us. We read through them. Charles and I talk about how nice they are. It's like, it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
So it does mean a lot. Please do that if you enjoy our podcast and want to help us out. And all that being said, just listening is more than enough. Thank you so much.
Listening, guys. We love it so much. Thank you so much for listening, and support indie authors on hashtag Indie August. Get out there and read an indie fantasy book today. You will not be disappointed. And as always, guys, go forth and conquer, friends.